What is your favorite book? Your favorite movie? Have you got it? Now, why do you love it? What is it about your favorite story or stories that grabs you? Today on The Stretch, we'll discuss the human tradition of storytelling, what makes a good story, and why we love the stories we do. Now, as a disclaimer, I don't know if you've changed careers since we met last, Travis, but I am not a fiction author or a screenwriter or a stage or screen producer. How about you?
Nope, none of the above for me.
Yeah, now there is some overlap between what authors and producers consider in their craft and what readers and viewers think about when they consume those art forms. But for today's purpose, we are unpaid expert consumers of literature and film. And between you and me, Travis, given that, and my body of work in reading and watching things over my lifetime, I'm expecting a Lifetime Achievement Award really any time now.
Yeah, it would be well-deserved, Brad.
Yeah, thank you. Now, before we get into our discussion on why we like the stories we like, we're going to talk about why we seek entertainment and information via storytelling. So, what makes reading enjoyable? Why do we go to the library or listen to books on Audible? Or why do we go to the movies? Why do we stream TV shows and movies into our homes? What are your thoughts on that, Travis? Why do you read and watch? Listen.
I think there's many layers to it. Entertainment, for one. Sometimes we need an escape. People say they read for an escape. A good story takes us away from the stresses of the day. But I think there's some deeper meaning to that as well. There could be a larger need. There could be a need for companionship or friendship, or maybe we're trying to work through a problem. Maybe we need some insight.
Okay, so just kind of naturally seeking information for things. Yeah, I think that's great. And the great thing about even more casually watching is that I think we can kind of put those things in the vault until they're needed later. A good story can do that for us. Now, you mentioned, companionship or friendship. And when my kids were younger, we used to I had a built-in computer desk and some bookcases at the end of the stairs going down to the basement. It was kind of a larger landing area and there was nothing there. And my wife made this picture collage with pictures of the kids reading and doing their artwork and stuff like that. And in that collage, she had a quote, and it's the following, and I love it. It kind of goes to what you said about friendship or companionship. You know you've read a good book when you turn the last page and feel as if you've lost a friend. It's a quote by Paul Sweeney. It's one of my favorites.
That's a great one.
Remember your sadness at finishing the Harry Potter series? And you're like, there's no more.
Yeah. Yeah. Every time.
Come on, man. So what do we do then? We just reread them, right? Mm-hmm. As humans, we have both of the capacity to tell stories and a desire to hear them. So I think that's why the tradition has continued throughout the history of mankind. In my mind, when I see it, I see like, the shaman or the, some kind of wizened character who has been around a while, and he knows all of the lore and all of the culture, and people excitedly gather to hear him on a regular basis. In a lot of cultures, it would be, kind of after their evening meal or late day meal. And in my mind, I see it as taking place around a fireside. But they would do these cultural traditions even before writing, and they would pass these histories down orally because, of course, they didn't have writing. And they do that for the purposes of, instruction, teaching the younger generation values that society feels is important. For cultural identity and unity. So their first purposes were to educate.
Yeah, storytelling traditions are fascinatingly ancient, but we do them now. I have a lot of fun in my household. We read stories together, and it's just a great uniting activity. Right now, my oldest son's learning to read. He knows how to read, but we're trying to sharpen that skill. And our goal has been to find stories that are entertaining and also stories that tell and invite us to think about how to be. What kind of people do we want to be? What kind of things do we want to understand? And we ask questions and we can discuss. And then learning occurs through a story. It's pretty fascinating. And I know growing up, I heard stories from my grandparents on their experiences. Grandpa would tell stories about living during World War II. Grandma would tell stories about being rationed with food during World War II, and totally different time that I haven't experienced. So a story can help us experience things that we may never experience ourselves. So it's a lot of fun to do that.
I think that's one of the great things about storytelling is that it's not generally done with, someone telling a story to a peer. It's generally best done when there is an intergenerational element, where there's a generation gap, and then sharing the story bridges that gap, and it connects the older person with the younger generation, and they're giving them a sense of historicity and their heritage and perspective. And the young person is gaining that perspective and an appreciation for the older generation and what they've been through, and that uniting and that common information that they now both share first and second hand, but that they share on some level. And then the younger generation can use that going forward. We can learn as humans. We learn from other people's experience. We don't have to do everything ourselves. So I think that's a super valuable thing when that's done intergenerationally.
I love it. And it builds identity, right? For a young person hearing a story like that, they could say, oh, I understand where I came from. I understand the experiences of those who came before me. I want to be like that. Or I want to avoid certain things.
Absolutely. That's huge. My wife's family is very good at not only knowing where they came from with names and stuff, but about knowing the stories of things that happened to those people. And they have been through some hard times, but knowing kind of where they were and what they've done, it definitely gives them a sense of identity and strength.
And you can also have fun with it too. I think of stories that my grandma here in town tells. They're funny. She tells a story about her older brother being upset with her because she hit a ball farther than him. Just little things. Or she would ride on the cows bareback, holding onto their ears out on the family farm.
Nice. My wife has a relative who, a female, would hustle the young boys when they would move to a new town. Her brother would say, I'll bet my sister can run faster than you. And they'd be like, nah. And then sure enough, she would beat them in a foot race, and, the funds were paid and whatever. But, and the story is that she never lost a race. And in fact, when her boys got old enough that they almost beat her, that's when she decided to retire.
Oh, nice.
But she was very fast, and that they know that story. And I have kids who are good runners. I have, all of my kids have done cross country, and knowing that one of their ancestors, she had that gift, I think it connects them with her. So those stories, the family stories, those are most valuable, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Every once in a while, I'll be talking with someone at work that I meet, or elsewhere, and they'll tell me a story. I'm like, that's really cool. Have you written that down? Have you shared that? That's an important item that should be part of your legacy. And since we have not just oral histories now, but since we have all means of capturing and transmitting and archiving information, let's use it.
Yeah. Pass it on, right? And that's even this ancient element to the storytelling. That's what they did. They passed these things on to carry forth tradition and these ideas.
And so as we conclude about ancient storytelling, we note that it was done not just in spoken word, but that often storytellers would use songs, they would dance, some sort of performance, or it would be some kind of epic poem. Lots of different means of expression and artistic devices that they would use to convey their stories to their communities and from generation to generation. And in my mind, I see that taking place. And as I thought about that, my mind kind of naturally flashed forward to what does that look like for us today? When my children were younger and I'll still own, my wife would gather them frequently in the evenings, sometimes on the weekends, and she would read to the whole group. She's read with them individually too, as have I, or in smaller groups. But often it would be for the whole family. And her most ambitious achievement was reading all of the Little House on the Prairie books to all of our family. Wow, that was really awesome. And we've always enjoyed going to the movies together too. We don't do it often, but sometimes we do, and those are good times. And as an aside for me, I still think going to the movie is one of the most awesome things that I could ever do. To enjoy life, to me, there's so much grandeur and wonder and awe about that's experienced by going to the movies. And that goes back to my initial experience as a kid, and that's still with me. But that's basically storytelling. Somebody is telling a story, and we're going to hear it. And at home, a lot of times after dinner, we will gather together for a movie night. Sometimes we will just go out and sit by the fire if it's nice outside. But in the wintertime, movie nights happen on a pretty regular basis, as is probably the case with a lot of people in a northern climate like ours, which right now we're at 0 degrees.
Yes.
So that's the warmest it's been all day, actually.
Yeah, it is.
So you mentioned having an instructive element to storytelling. And I do think that a good movie should entertain, but also give us something else that we can use. Oh, we don't need to be hit over the head with an agenda. In fact, a lot of people are going away from certain movies or movie franchises or studios right now for that reason. But there should be, I think, an inherent and organic element that resonates with us, that has some meaning to us, a take-home message, something that gives us our money's worth, something that we can use. What are your thoughts on that, Travis? You mentioned it a little bit, but I can tell you have more to say.
Yeah, I think that as humans, we're creatures of meaning. We look for meaning and understanding. We're trying to navigate uncertainty. So I think a story in the form of a movie especially, you're getting things visually, you're hearing things, and hopefully trying to understand yourself or those around you. So a quote I read across in an article about that. It says, humans are inclined to see narratives where there are none because it can afford meaning to our lives, a form of existential problem solving. That struck me just because, you and I, Brad, could see something or experience something, draw different things from that based on how we see the world, what we're experiencing.
One of my sons and I are rewatching the Rocky movies. For me, it's a rewatch. For him, it's new, some of them. And one of the take-homes is just how chill Rocky is. Like, nothing ruffles him. Until it does. Then he can deal with it. He can process and deal with it in the appropriate way. Work out his problems and resolve his conflicts in the ring. But in normal everyday life, he's just so chill. And we both have commented on that multiple times as we've been watching. Like, I want to be like that. And you know that he cares. But the character is just so down to earth and meek and humble. And not because he's a simpleton. I mean, he definitely goes through an evolution from a simple, illiterate character. But it's more than that. There are virtues that he possesses that we found very appealing as we've watched those. And so I like your story that they can afford meaning to our lives.
Yeah, you found something useful out of the Rocky movies, which on the surface are there to entertain, but there's underworkings going on there. That's great.
So let's talk about then elements of our favorite stories then. First things, favorite characters. What's your favorite story or movie or favorite book? Who do you like?
Oh, there's so many. I've been thinking about that. I think about the underdog stories that I grew up watching. My favorite movie in that regard is Rudy.
That's a good one.
Yeah, classic story. Rudy Rudiger. I love The Sandlot. Maybe there's a lot of nostalgia there that I enjoy. Um, yeah, all kinds of stuff. What about you, Brad?
Nostalgia is great, and in fact, that's coming up on a future podcast. But I also thought underdogs were huge when it comes to stories we like and why we like them. And in fact, we've already mentioned Rocky, but there's a quote that I saw by Matt Johnson in a Psychology Today article, and he says, and he's talking about how companies, businesses, advertisers will use the underdog approach to appeal to us in regard to enticing us to consume a product or trust a company. But for our purposes regarding storytelling, this applies. He says, the underdog story is one of the most classic storylines with a universal appeal, reliably driving feelings of empathy. They tap into the qualities we like best about ourselves and find most admirable in others. We love underdog stories because we feel they need us. It creates that gravitational bond between us and the underdog because we love to feel needed as social creatures. So somehow if we root for Rudy, then we're invested in him and he's more likely to achieve success, even though the movie is what it is, but we can still yell at the screen, or we can still feel in our hearts, hey, this guy is all right. We hope that things go well for him, and doggone it, we just love him. And this also goes to something that when I was asking one of my sons about this, he said that relatability was an important element. I guess we'll probably talk a little more about that as we go. But so many of us come from, or we feel that we come from, an underdog background. And there always is a top dog, with respect to us, or there's something that we're fighting against. So we can always see ourselves as an underdog.
Yeah, I like that application a lot. I think about Rudy. What draws me to Rudy? The guy never gave up. He was persistent. I mean, how many times was his name not on that roster? Kept going.
That is a great virtue.
Yeah. Never gave up. Got beat up with the practice team over and over and over and over. And then he got the game time right at the end. So you got to admire Rudy. But what can we see in ourselves with Rudy? Keep going. Keep pursuing what you want to do. Don't give up.
Yeah, there's the direct impulse that we have to draw from these stories, something that we can use. And with that too, when we see the underdog succeed, that is motivating and inspiring also. This quote from Matt Johnson goes on to say, studies have shown that the literal act of witnessing an underdog story gives us hope. If we walk out of the cinema after watching classic underdog tales like Rocky, Karate Kid, or The Pursuit of Happiness, the impact of experiencing the protagonist's ascendance fills us with a newfound sense of hope. And this isn't a fleeting feeling. We carry this feeling with us several days after it's over.
That's fascinating.
You know what? That's awesome. So, yeah, it's not just that I want to do karate. Whenever we watch something and then we want to do the thing, we call that the Karate Kid effect. We think that we are awesome, or that we can become awesome at whatever it is. And, that's cute and all for kids and even adults. But as we've discussed, and we'll discuss, there are actually things that can come of it that can make us better people and be useful to us. What are some other things about developing characters that we like? We like to see them progress. We have, in stories, there are static characters and dynamic characters, and the dynamic characters are there for, showing us the effects of their circumstances, their lives, the events, the things that happen to them, how they change them. And that can be a model for us. Some of my favorite dynamic characters that I have, of course, Frodo Baggins, Peter Parker, and that can be Peter 1, 2, or 3.
Right.
Abraham Lincoln. Gosh, what can you say about him? Nacho Libre. He's a dynamic character. Edmond Dantes from the Count of Monte Cristo, which we'll talk more about. I asked my children what they thought, and one of them mentioned Steve Arrington.
Okay.
If you're a Stranger Things fan. And then I also even thought of good old Ivan Drago in Creed 2, the bad guy from Rocky 4. And I love what happens with Ivan Drago in Creed 2. it is a bonus, an element that I didn't expect. Besides Rudy, who do you like? Why do you like him?
I'm thinking of Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird, and thinking about why he had these attributes that maybe I hope to have: his calmness, his wise judgment, and just doing the right thing.
And his persistence also. So that's another common element between him and Rudy that you appreciate.
Yeah, so I've always loved Atticus Finch.
That's awesome.
I think of Pip from Great Expectations, Charles Dickens. He was just this poor little fellow, right? We sympathize with him, but he had a benefactor, which was unseen for a huge part of the story. And it makes me think about, who I benefit from, who in my life has been in the background, moving me forward, and makes me grateful. So those are a couple that come to mind.
Good perspective. Excellent. All right, that moves us on to favorite plots or plot elements. For me, I like mystery. I don't like things that I can see them before they happen. If they are highly derivative or formulaic, unless they are highly stylized or entertaining on some other level, they're going to have a hard time holding my interest. Kind of annoy my kids sometimes because they'll be watching something and I'll walk through the room and I'll be like, that's this guy, this is going to happen. Not something I've even seen. I've just seen it before.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen this movie before, not literally this one, but I've seen it. And they're like, shut up, Dad. And then it will inevitably turn out that that was, what was going to happen. And I'm like, yeah. So you're welcome.
Nice.
Spoiler. I also like stories where you see that the writer, the author, the producer, whatever, that they knew exactly what they were going to do beforehand, that they saw it from the end to the beginning. They knew throughout the whole sequence and plot arc, the character development, exactly how it was going down. Anybody can start a story. I've started lots of stories.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
I've finished fewer than I've started, and I've finished even fewer of them well, as far as, bedtime stories for kids or any kind of creative processes like that, where I've dabbled in creative writing just for fun. What are your thoughts there with the intricacies of the plot, the vision of the author?
For me, it creates a sense of appreciation. Like, wow, I just experienced something that they put together for who knows how long, right? And they put it in front of me and I experienced it. And you see a different perspective. You say, I didn't expect this. That's amazing. That's an experience.
Yeah, that's it. To me, it's very satisfying. It's very tantalizing to see a story where gosh, that's just perfect. Now, the ultimate example of that for me is the Harry Potter series with J.K. Rowling. She knows it inside and out, upside down, start to finish, reversed, inverted, everything. And it's all set up and it's primed. And then as things move along, it's already there. There's nothing that's forced or contrived or that feels awkward or inorganic or like they didn't know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's a great example. That creative power that's behind those stories.
And a really good story does have to have things plugged in, because you've never seen an episode of Scooby-Doo where Mystery Incorporated unmasks someone that you haven't seen already in the episode. You're like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
Where's he from? No, it's somebody you've already seen.
Every time.
So even in something as rudimentary and whatever as Scooby-Doo, they've got some idea where they're going. And again, some of them are formulaic, but if they can be done in a really clever way, I think that's amazing. My kids have consumed a lot of books and movies over the years about fairy tale revisions, which is kind of like what we do with superhero movies, right? We just keep taking the same origin story and cast of characters and then changing the story. And gosh, how many variations of Cinderella have we seen? And definitely some of them are better than others. What are your thoughts, Travis, on the nature of the conflict when we talk about a favorite story or a favorite book or movie? What is it about the nature of different conflicts that grabs you?
You've got your classic good and versus evil, but I like to see the different variations of that, where there's times when you think, is evil going to win? Is this darkness going to prevail in this story? Or you might find a removal of hope in a situation, like, what's going to happen? I don't like the way I feel. And, eventually that comes around. But that's attractive to me, light overpowering the darkness. It's cliche, right? But it's cliche for a reason.
Well, I think so. And it's not just something that we enjoy on an artistic or subjective level. It's something that goes much deeper in us as human beings, where we are naturally good. We are also naturally flawed. And we all have that conflict. And we hope that what's good will win. And that's actually one more of, the old Native American tale about the two wolves.
Yeah.
And the wizard, the grandfather, tells his grandson that inside each one of us, there are two wolves fighting for dominance. And one is good and one is bad. And the child says, well, which one will win? And he says, the one that you feed. We naturally want to be and do good. I think we want to succeed. We care for people in our lives and want them to succeed and do well, and we want to do our part to make it so, and as much as we can. And when we see other people striving to do that against forces of tyranny or injustice, two of my favorite stories that have really provoked my sense of justice are the Count of Monte Cristo and Hunger Games.
Okay. Yep.
Years ago, when it first came out, my wife was you should read the Hunger Games. You should read the Hunger Games. And I had actually already picked it up one day in Barnes & Noble and flicked through the first page. I was like, yeah, it's not me. I don't do dystopian fiction. They always want to steal somebody's DNA. It's always miserable. It's fairly hopeless. So, but they're not all like that. I'm overgeneralizing. But just my personal preference has always been fantasy or historical fiction or alternate histories, and or even current stuff. But I did, she prevailed upon me to read it. And once I saw this thing happening with the tributes and the different districts and the capital and their tyranny and power mongering and oppression of everyone else, boy, it really offended my sense of justice.
Right.
And the same thing with the Count of Monte Cristo. And I hope that we're not giving away any spoilers with these, but I figure that if a book has been out for that long, like if most of the Western United States was still part of Mexico when it was written, and I ruin it for you, that's on you.
Yeah.
Right? Or
well,
if, right. I mean, if anesthesia was not part of medical practice at the time, and you haven't read it yet, that's on you. But in the Count of Monte Cristo, we have this virtuous young man with life before him, and he's full of promise, and he's just a good soul. And he and his love, and they have these aspirations and tender feelings towards each other, and boy, everything is right there for his taking. And if you guys decide for their own selfish purposes, different purposes, each one of them, but it's the old thing of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So they become a conspiracy, and they do this terrible thing, and it's so unjust what happens to Edmond Dantes in the story. And once you start reading it, in fact, the first time I read the Count of Monte Cristo, it was hard for me to get into. It was a slow start, but once I figured out this is something bad's happening to him, and somebody better fix it, and I'm going to keep reading until they do.
Okay.
And that just, again, it provoked my sense of justice, and I wanted to see how it was going to go down.
You were driven to make it right.
Yes. Even if only by finishing the story was the only contribution I could make to help the hero or whatever. So what about some other plot elements? For me, I get intrigued by a unique premise. Someone that can, for example, see the future or whatever. If there's lots of ways that can be done, and we've seen it done poorly many times, but when it's done well, it can be very intriguing and engaging and satisfying. Other other things that you've encountered that you like?
Yeah, similar line of thought. The time travel aspects. What if you could go back and change things, alter the history? That can be fascinating to consider. You think about history itself. David McCullough said that the people in history didn't know they were making history. So when I see a story where that's inferred, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I like that.
We're going to go back and change something. We're going to go back and alter this, or we got to go back and solve this problem.
So Travis, in some stories, and a lot of good ones that I like, I've noticed there's this time where everything goes sideways for the heroes. And storytellers, authors, they call this the all is lost moment. What do you see? Like, what flashes in your mind when you hear that phrase?
Yeah, for me, it goes back to that loss of hope. I'm thinking of The Dark Knight Rises. The villain is Bane, and he scares me because he felt so real. So he took away hope from that city. Batman's getting beat up. His mask is getting knocked off. I'm like, what's happening? This isn't the hero story I'm used to. Where's this going to go? So that's what comes to mind, because it felt very real when I was watching that movie.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's nobody wants to see the hero getting owned.
Right.
And a really good story does, at that moment, that's exactly how you're supposed to feel. You're supposed to feel a hopelessness. You feel, all is lost. That's why it's called the all is lost moment, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. And sometimes that just happens. And there's no deliverance for our characters. And the thing that I thought of when I was thinking of an example was Rogue One.
Oh, yeah.
Now, first of all, Rogue One is probably the best movie in the canon.
I love that one.
And it perfectly marries the original trilogy with the prequels. And it also fixes a huge plot problem with why they build this planetoid weapon and then make it so easy to destroy for somebody that knows how. And I just love that.
That's so true.
It's retrofit in a way that seems like it's supposed to be there from the beginning. The characters are great, but, it doesn't always work out for the heroes. And that brings me to one point here is a good story often involves loss in the end, or somewhere along the way, someone we love or someone that the main character loves doesn't make it. And those things have to happen in good stories sometimes, because we need to know what's at stake. We need to know why the things that they're doing matter, and what their choices or their actions cost them. So loss happens. And yeah, Rogue One is my favorite example of that. But it's still satisfying storytelling, because we see a continuation of the rebellion through their sacrifice.
Yeah.
Which is another important element that you mentioned as we were preparing for this.
Yeah, you hit it on the head with sacrifice. I think, as you were mentioning these things, good stories have these emotional connections that happen to us, or we're experiencing these emotions and we have to figure out why. And so a good story helps us understand that. And the sacrifice, again, that's part of life. We deal with loss. A sacrifice in a good story typically moves something forward for someone else.
I think that in a real satisfying story, it does. And again, that goes to there are various religious themes from different religions that believe that is part of their story. And certainly we see it in Christianity.
Yes.
And so many of the things that resonate with me are things that I think fit into a larger picture. Like you said, they naturally resonate with us because as humans, we want good to triumph over evil. We care about others. We're willing to make sacrifices. We love Tony Stark for snapping his fingers.
Yeah.
We also love Natasha Romanoff. These things are all part of this triumph of all the other characters and the people that they care about.
Yeah, Chronicles of Narnia.
Absolutely. That is a huge one. And it's very moving when you see that happen. And we want to draw from that and take inspiration from that, because in our lives there are people that we care about. And so it's an awesome model to follow, that we're willing to do hard things for others. Armageddon, I just watched that a couple days ago with my son. He had never seen it. And just there's this moment there at the end where Bruce Willis shows what kind of person he really is, and basically tees up the future for everybody else through his actions. And it's very moving, even though so many other things about the movie don't make a lot of sense and they're cheesy or contrived. It's a great film to watch anyway, because just for that moment for me.
Yeah. Amid the sorrows of those moments, you find the joy that comes from those actions.
There's a payoff.
A payoff, yeah.
Which brings us again to endings. Happy endings, not happy endings. I don't need an ending to be formulaic or as expected. I don't always need the guy to get the girl. I don't need the underdog to win necessarily. We generally like when they do, or if they at least undergo some positive change or reach something along the way, even if it's not maybe the ultimate thing. But you mentioned The Dark Knight Rises. One of my favorite endings is in The Dark Knight, where Harvey Dent is not what we thought he was, and Gotham City is going to be destroyed when they find out what happens. And Batman and Commissioner Gordon have this amazing conversation. And Batman says, basically, I'm going to fall on the sword for the city, because sometimes people just deserve to have their faith rewarded. Sometimes they deserve more than the truth. And I love that. He's making, again, it's a sacrifice play. He's doing what's hard for him to make it better for other people. And I love that. It's a very satisfying scene.
I like it. And as far as taking what's useful from that, it goes to, what kind of person do I want to be? Right? How can I sacrifice? Who can I help? What can I do for someone else?
Right. I think a good story, it entertains, it informs. When we see noble characters emerging through their difficulties, or willing to sacrifice for others, or to stick to their convictions in the presence of a great opposition, or whatever it is, even if they don't achieve what we think they should achieve, the fact that they did the right thing, sometimes it's more powerful when they don't achieve what they want to achieve, because it shows they're not attached to the reward. That's inspiring. Sometimes we just need to do things because they're right.
Yeah.
Not because of any expectation of glory or anything like that.
Yeah. The worthy pursuit.
Yeah. And so with these ideas, these characters, these plots, these are things that we can assimilate into our lives. These are characters we can emulate, and we can aspire to be like them and possess the qualities that they demonstrate. And that, for me, if you can happen to throw in a little humor, an awesome soundtrack, which is another discussion entirely.
Yes, it is.
And some good casting and production value. For me, that's great. With movies, as we've gone through this, we've focused more on movies, but certainly the same things apply to books, which is what we focus on most in our articles, and we'll probably talk more about in even our next podcast. But movies are an important part of our cultural fabric today, and part of our lives. But we see the same things, regardless of if we're watching a film or reading a book or listening to a book. These things resonate with us for reasons.
They do. Hard to imagine life without stories. Thanks for stretching with us. That's all we have for today. Next episode, we will be exploring why we love nostalgia.